So, in any case, what was so cool about that is, well, you could actually test three-phase things quite simply. And its significance to Nashville is Jerry managed to make the thing look like a big guitar amp. Thanks for the little chuckle. Okay. So, I wanted to talk a little, and look how much the technology has moved forward with the wonderful digital test equipment that we all enjoy, not just for protective relays, but other things. And there's been a sort of a neck and neck race between the test equipment and the meters and relays and other equipment that we test, and that's not going to stop. I want to talk a little bit about some technology today that I think is going to become widespread and used pretty quick because of the new kinds of problems that we're faced to solve in our industry. So that's what we're going to do. A lot of this is going to be about speed and communications and time. Today, there is no reason to wait to clear a fault. So, time coordination will be relegated to backup. So testing is, of course, whether it's on your end or our end, is a vital part of safe, reliable, economical operation of power systems, and we're facing a lot of new challenges as we go forward. So let's talk about something that's really cool. I can't think of another industry that gets to deliver their commodity at the speed of light. It's pretty cool if you order a book on Amazon, you get it tomorrow, okay? But if you turn on a switch, you get it in microseconds. So light travels 186,000 miles a second, 3 times 10 to the 8th meters a second, 11 inches, that's a nanosecond. So sometimes it's fun to think of the speed of light as distance like that. So one day I was in the Chicago area going on Skokie Boulevard up north of the city, and near there was a train pulling coal cars to a power plant. Above it, a double circuit 345 kV transmission line. And I said, oh, that's what we do for a living. You know, we take that coal, which is lumbering along there, and it wasn't going 50 miles an hour. I gave it the benefit of the doubt on the slide here. And we turn it into electricity that's there to serve us when we need it, you know, safely, reliably, and economically. 7 cents a kilowatt hour where we live. So there in the middle is a coal train we just mentioned, and over there on the right is a pipeline, and the line pack probably moves around 30 miles an hour. So when it gets cold in the northwest where we live, well, we sure hope that the gas guys down in Texas, they had about 2 days earlier managed to turn up the pressure so we stay warm. And I particularly like this picture of a pipeline because it reminds me, it's a good example that the gas guys are onto us. See, they came up with a 3-phase pipeline here. I've got a better laugh. So if we're moving energy at the speed of light, what's with a 5-second SCADA scan? What's with time coordination? Yeah, we can do a lot better than that. So Mr. Eastvad of Bonneville Power Administration in the 70s pointed this out with a graph that stuck with me. And this is a particular 500 kV lines. Results may vary, of course. And it's a line of equal stability. And what you see over there on the ordinate is the fault clearing time in cycles. So if you can get that down from 3 cycles to 2 cycles, he pointed out that that transmission line would stay stable for another 250 megawatts. So if you divide 250 megawatts by 16 or 17 milliseconds, you get about 15 megawatts a millisecond. So every time you speed up tripping, angular stability gives you another distribution feeder worth of capacity. So if somebody wants to tell you that speed doesn't matter, think twice. We're moving energy at the speed of light. Nobody else can do it. And when we speed up our game, that we're getting a lot more performance. And that's a lot more payback for the capital that investors have put into the power system too, isn't it? So there it is. We got this need for speed. And the power systems are changing. That we're dealing with intermittent sources in stiffer loads like data farms, server farms. And every light bulb today is a stiffer load than the light bulbs that our government banned. So it used to be that you could brown out the power system, and the tendency over time is the distribution system is getting stiffer and stiffer, meaning you try to brown it out and you just become a lot more inefficient because all these switching power supplies, be they in one of those servers or be they in your computer or the light bulbs, well, they just keep the light at a constant value, don't they? So you lower the voltage, the current goes up, the losses go up, the bars go up, and pretty soon you're going to end up in Valhalla with a voltage blackout, voltage collapse. So here we are with these challenges of the intermittent sources, the stiffer loads, and faster dynamics. You think of a rotating machine with a huge polar moment of inertia. Think all the energy that's stored in that rotor. And as we use more of these intermittent sources, their energy is being stored in capacitors. So that's a big change, and it makes the power systems twitchier, caffeinated. So we got to deal with that. In many parts of this country and others, when the wind stops or the sun comes out, load flows change fast. Who's seen that? You can see it at the substation and you watch load flows that used to be rock solid and determined by customers and dispatchers, and now it's determined by our deity, or at least the weatherman. So here's a power plant out in Wyoming. Fantastic power plant, Jim Bridger. I'm going to use a 4-letter word, coal. See, so coal goes into that and makes a lot of cheap electricity for about 3 cents an hour, 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So that plant, by the way, I think coal is a good 4-letter word, but I didn't want to give you the wrong idea there. That plant is capable of putting out 2,000 megawatts. That's what the investors paid for. That's what the Public Utility Commission promised you and me it would do. So then the regulators come along at some point and they say, because of stability issues, you can't operate that thing above 1,300 megawatts. So you see there's 4 units there, count the smokestacks. So that would mean that you could use all of the first unit, all of the second unit, and about 2/3 of the third unit, and none of the fourth unit. So it was stability limited. They were afraid that if you lost some transmission, that the power system would rip apart. So there was definitely a need for speed. And if they could find a way to get the generation offline fast enough, then they could run the fourth unit and all of the third unit. Is that cool? So they had a big, now what they should have done is built more transmission line. But you know about Banana and NIMBY, don't you? Banana has built absolutely nothing near anyone, and NIMBY is not in my backyard. So the next, I'm kicking my own goal here because we built a remedial action scheme that sped the whole thing up. It's a dual, triple remedial action scheme that trips the excess generation above that 1300 megawatt stability limit in 17 milliseconds. We're not counting cycles anymore. We're into milliseconds and microseconds, and that's something to think about when you're thinking about how you test things. Idaho Power had a similar problem, and we got it down to 10 milliseconds because it was a smaller thing, not quite as complicated. Taiwan Power, because of their E1 network, well, we got 120 milliseconds, but over all of the country. Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, another countrywide system, we're doing remedial action in 18 milliseconds. Every summer there used to be a blackout that would solve that. So protection, we're getting faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So this is about where we are now for distance protection. Take a look at that graph, and you can see for close-in faults with 421, you are probably seeing something about 8 milliseconds. And you get all the way down to halfway down the transmission line, you're still doing 9 milliseconds. All of these hockey stick up at the end because, well, you don't want to overreach. So it's better to slow down and be right than be in a hurry and be wrong. So as you reach the point of maximum reach, you need to be more and more accurate about the impedance measurement the relays are making. So what I'm interested in is looking forward. So this is kind of looking backwards, right? Well, here's how fast we were and we got faster. So how are we going to get faster yet? And of course be secure and reliable. So I'm talking now about the space below the green line, which reminds me of a limerick. There once was a lady from Bright whose speed was much faster than light. She set out one day in a relative way and returned on the previous night. Okay? So, I want you to think about that a little bit, because we need to go to traveling waves and time domain principles. We don't have to wait around for cycles anymore in protection. Some schemes, like differential protection, are inherently, I mean, that's just Kirchhoff's current law, and nobody said you had to do that with phasers. You can do that with instantaneous quantities. So we know we can make things a lot faster. And we're working on a time domain transmission line protection relay that we need to be talking about milliseconds using time domain technology. So when we go to test things, we're going to be looking at some new principles of operation and new methods and equipment for testing. Fortunately, I believe it's generally going to turn out to be simpler than some of the things we do now. Simpler, but different. So here we are with a distance element that'll get down to 4 milliseconds over at least half of the line. And in a directional comparison scheme, we will do 2 milliseconds plus channel time. Now, plus channel time, let's think about what that means for a second. And let's suppose we have a 100-mile transmission line. The speed of light on the transmission, the speed of energy propagation on the transmission line is essentially free space, and you can figure about 6 microseconds per nautical mile. So let's just use 6 microseconds because it's an easy number for me, so I don't screw up the podium math. Okay with that? So, when you see something happen on your end, if you could tell me over the power line or through a light beam from a laser or something, then I will know about it in no less than 6 microseconds per mile. Times 100 miles is 600 microseconds. Now, if we stick that into a fiber, light travels slower in fiber than it does in free space, right? You take the speed of light and you divide it by the square root of the permittivity of the medium, which means you cut it in half. So Hey, that's a good one. If you're ever talking to your communications buddies, they're talking about how fast their stuff is.